Hi everyone. The last video that I uploaded was 2 weeks ago. In that last video, I talked excitedly about how my family and I were relocating to the Isle of Wight. I'd gotten a new job offer at Ventnor, and I was due to start the following week. A lot has happened in the short time between then and now, but the long and the short of it is I don't work there anymore. I gave it 9 days and I realized I couldn't do it. So since I no longer work for this company, I can confirm that the company I worked for was Royal Mail. So, as you know, for over a year, I think it was December 2023, up until May 2025, so basically a year and a bit, I've been working for Royal Mail, except I had been working as a collections officer. Now in Royal Mail, there's basically two different branches of work. There's collections and deliveries. Collections are very straightforward and very easy. All you need really is a driver's license. What you do is you drive around a set route, you pick up mail, parcels and mail bags from, in my case, it was 25 or 26 different business firms, and you bring all the mail back to the sorting office at the depot. You sort all the mail according to its stamp classification, and then it gets taken by truck to the big sorting office at Jubilee, London. And that's it. That's your shift. It's only 4 hours. Very easy stuff. It's good money as well. And I really enjoyed that job. It wasn't perfect, but it was damn better than all the jobs I had before then. But then there's deliveries. Yes, that's right. Collection was the first one. Deliveries is the second one. And if we're being honest here, deliveries is what most people immediately associate being a postman with when they think of postal work, being a postman. Most people think of deliveries. Deliveries is an entirely different experience. So, in deliveries, you're basically doing everything. Well, a lot of things. Let me break that down for you. The first 2 to 3 hours in delivery, you're sorting the mail. There are each person is assigned a sort of cage or cubicle. I don't know what the right word is for it. But you will be prescribed a set route that contains some, I don't know how many, 300 or 400 different individual addresses contained within dozens of different localities along a certain route. Like, for instance, there's Fudge Nuts Lane, and there's 20 or 23 different houses along Fudge Nut Lane, and all the odd numbers run along one side, and then the even numbers run along another. And then you'll find somewhere in the middle of Fudge Nut Lane, there's Brown Turd Close, and you'll have to deliver mail to Brown Turd Close as well, because that's contained within Fudge Nut Lane. Because of the way that they're designed on the map, the two intersect with each other, and they're both contained within your mail route. And there's roughly, I don't know the exact number because it varies depending on the avenue, the lane, the close, or whatever. But on the minimum end of the scale, there's at least 12 or 13 individual houses. Some of them have names and not numbers. Not that that makes much of a difference, mind, because even the houses that do have numbers, it's very hard to spot all of them without lots of experience and lots of training. Sometimes you literally have to walk up to a house to see what number it is, or you have to use your logic. You might be walking between 12 and 16 thinking, where's number 14? And then you see a house next to your right that doesn't have the number 14 on it, but you think this has got to be number 14. Anyway, you have to deliver mail and packages and large packages, special delivery as well. And you also have to pick up collections, because that's another thing. You have to pick up parcels that have been rejected. And you have to do that for around 400 or 500 different individual addresses. Well, the ones that have mail intended to be sent towards them anyway. Anyway, that's the first part. You have to sort the mail. Also, you have to load all the heavy parcels and all the mail. Typically, the way they do it is they take all of the stamp mail and those business flyers, those Domino Pizza leaflets, stuff that you never really asked for. They bundle it in these rubber bands, and the way it's supposed to work is you walk down the avenue, or the fudge nut turd close, or whatever it's called, and you deliver them to each house one at a time. And it sounds simple and straightforward, but you got to keep in mind that in addition to just giving out letters, which you had to fit through each door, there's also parcels which can't be fit through the door always, so you need to knock on their door or ring the bell, and most of the time you will need the customer to be there and give some sort of visual verification that they collected their parcel. And delivering the letters on its own is straightforward enough, but the parcels, there isn't one guaranteed parcel for each house, but each parcel is large and unwieldy, and because of how many of them you will have crammed into your sling bag, where you have all the mail and along for your route and all that, you'll have to constantly be rummaging through them to see which address and which house number or which house name each one is intended for. Because if you're not paying attention, you will have walked past one and you'll have to double back and walk back over to it. And that doesn't even take into account the large parcels, the big and clunky ones that weigh around 20 kilograms. With those, you got to get in the van and drive over to the intended house. How many parcels are there usually? Well, in my experience, I think there's over 200. In total, you're making somewhere between 500 or 600 calls each shift. And a call in Royal Mail terminology is basically delivery of mail or parcel, an individual item of mail that you have to deliver. There's 300 or 400, I don't know the exact number, I could be pulling this out of my ass. 300 or 400 individual addresses, 500 or 600 individual items of mail, and you have to walk around and deliver each of them to every single house. It sounds a lot more simple than it really is. Anyone who thinks that being a postman is a simple job, I don't think they've ever tried it. And I thought I could handle this. I genuinely thought, because I'd worked in collections for over a year now, this can't be any different. This can't be challenging. I'm sure I got this, you know? This is where the real money is. This is where you can rake in lots of overtime pay. This is where you can do the hard graft and come out of it with good job security. I don't know how I got it so wrong, but I just wasn't cut out for it. And I was beginning to suspect that I wasn't cut out for this job because I kept making the same mistakes over and over during my introductory week. So each new employee at Royal Mail is meant to be given 3 days training where they have a partner basically take them around the individual mail route that they're given and show them which houses they go to first and in what order, what the most efficient way is to travel around the route. They made it look incredibly easy. They made me look like an idiot for not keeping up. Even though I couldn't, it took me many, many days, over a week, to memorize the names of all the different avenues and closes, you know, like Fudge Nut Lane, Brown Turd Close, Shitsville Road, there's so many right now, and I don't know the exact number, but there's a few, got to be somewhere between 20 and 30, and within each of those individual localities, there's 10, 12, or maybe 20 individual houses, although in some cases, like for instance, in the route that I was doing, all the addresses, all the localities were gathered around a main arterial road which cut through Upper Ventnor, and there were over 100 addresses on both sides of that road. So yeah, sometimes there's over 100. So it's a lot more complicated than it sounds, and I couldn't manage it. The lady who I'd been partnered up with, she kept giving me instructions, and she kept getting annoyed with me and frustrated with me when I didn't remember them. She'd be telling me things like, no, do you remember we go to this house first, and then we go to that house, and then we go to the golf course. I've never been that good at following instructions, but the pace at which I was expected to keep up with them, to be honest, it amazes me that other people are able to keep up with it. I don't know if this has something to do with the fact that I'm on the maybe it does have something to do with the fact that I'm congenitally retarded, but a lot of the things she said during my introductory week, obviously there were lots of things that she said to me which I misunderstood, but I made the decision to keep quiet about, because I know from experience that if somebody explains something to me and I fail to understand it, if I ask them to repeat themselves or clarify themselves, they get annoyed and they lose their temper with me. And that's a thing that I've learned from experience. Teachers tell you to ask questions, but nobody really wants you to ask questions. People get pissed off if you ask the same questions over and over again, so you learn to keep quiet. It's a survival strategy that I've picked up throughout the years. And I've never really drawn attention to my deficient ability to take on board complex instructions, because the truth is I never really thought it would be a big deal. I just thought, you know, it's a postal job. How hard can it be? Surely if anyone can do it, surely I can do it. I mean, what would it say about me if I couldn't do basic postal work? Well, here I am now. I should probably talk more, though, about the process that led to me burning out and quitting. So I was very reluctant to quit at first, and by the end of my introductory week, another thing I should say is that the contract I was on, it was a very specific kind of contract where you would work 6 days a week. Now that sounds like a lot of hours, and each shift was meant to be 6 hours, but in practice, it's not always guaranteed that you would finish 6 hours in your shift, because sometimes there's exceptionally large volume of mail, And the good thing about that is it means if you take longer than you're supposed to, you get to claim overtime pay, which is good. It's a nice bonus, but I'll explain why that wasn't enough to keep me on board later. So at the end of my introductory week, I thought to myself, well, this has been incredibly complex. There's a lot of different addresses. There's a lot of things I need to remember, but I'm sure maybe if I have a crack at it on my own, because that's the thing. Once you've had your introductory training and you know that you've been shown the route, you're basically just left to your own devices and you're expected to take care of it all on your own. I thought I could handle it. But by the beginning of the next week, starting next Monday, I began to realize just how deep the shit I was in. I can't remember how much mail I delivered, but less than half of all the parcels in my van had been given to their proper destination, and it was 6 p.m. To put that into context, I was meant to start work at 9 o'clock and finish at 3, basically, because that's how mathematically how my contract dictated how much time I was meant to be spending on each individual shift. And so I was 3 hours overdrawn. I was 3 hours past my predestined clock. One moment. And I got a call from Sandra. She asked me how I was faring. And I knew from then I really wasn't making any good progress, but she was really encouraging, my manager. She wanted me to stay on, and she was convinced that if she gave me just a little boost and she tried explaining things to me a bit more and helping me, I'd get the hang of it. And one thing I will give the staff over there is that they were very kind and encouraging. I was very reluctant to leave at first, but things just didn't seem to get better. By the following day, I think I'd made a bit more progress. Oh yeah, I should make one thing clear. Monday is the worst day for deliveries because there's always a greater volume of mail on Monday than there is on any other day, because Sunday there's no post. So all the post that's intended to be delivered on a Sunday but doesn't gets compounded with Monday's schedule, making Monday effectively twice as busy. Tuesday, Wednesday, and the rest of the days are a bit easier, I think. Maybe there are veteran posties out there who'll take a different view, but yeah, Tuesday was a little lighter in terms of volume, and I felt like I was making more progress. Except I did have a lot of help from my manager. She sorted all the mail for me. What she did was she made me load the back of the van with all the large parcels and made me deliver those before 11. I got back at 1 o'clock. And then she gave me all the mail sorted in bags, which were all labelled by her. And again, I was 2 hours past my scheduled clock out time, so she sent one of the other employees to help finish the mail that I had. And another thing I should make clear is that it was unbelievably hot during this time. The temperatures were averaging in the mid-30s, and I briefly talked about this in my last video because I didn't think the heat wave, I don't know, is it a heat wave or is it just a typical summer? I'm not sure, but I didn't think the heat was that serious. But then I realized that it was so hot inside my van that I couldn't use my mobile phone because the battery had fried. I just, sweat was pouring down my back, and I just had to keep myself dedicated to the mission. By the time I got back home, I was so exhausted, I lay down on the bed. I think I lay down on my mum's bed because that was the only place where I could be alone. And initially, I just wanted to go on my computer, but then I ended up falling asleep. This was at around 6 p.m. and I woke up, I think, 4.5 hours later at 11 p.m. I was unbelievably exhausted. And I think it all got to me by the following day. Despite the fact that this was a Wednesday and I supposedly had a much lower volume of mail than on Monday, I was not making any more progress than I was the previous day. If anything, I was getting slower. On the surface, I was getting better at memorizing the names of the houses and the order that I did it in. But for reasons that I just can't put into, I can't explain why this was. Maybe it was the heat, maybe it was the stress. I'd only delivered a third of my mail and I was six hours in the shift. I had a mental breakdown. I just sat in the van. I didn't cry, but I could have. It's weird, you know, there are times where you want to cry, but you don't. If anybody else had cried on a day like that, then I wouldn't have blamed them. And if you think I'm a pussy for talking about this, I didn't cry once while my dad was dying of cancer. So I guess the message here is we all have different thresholds. We have different breaking points. But anyway, I'd really reached my limit with this job. It just occurred to me how hopeless the whole thing was. Oh, and another thing I failed to mention, another thing that I should make clear is I'd been involved in an accident while I was on the job. I parked my van too close to a customer's fence and I dislodged it from where it was situated in the ground. So it began to wobble. So I had to let my manager know, and normally in Royal Mail, because they hold their drivers to a very high standard of behaviour, you get thrown off driving duties as a result of this. And that's really only happened once, or twice actually, back when I was in collections, but the fact that this happened 7 days in on my new job, it wasn't a good sign. It's not the best way to make a favourable impression on your new job, let's just say. Normally, I would have been better than this. Maybe it was the heat, maybe it was the exhaustion, but I damaged somebody's fence, and I lost one of the sets of keys for one of the vans. And to this day, I have no idea what happened to it. Luckily, with each van, I should get this out the way. With each van at my place of work, there are 2 keys that they give you. I think one is a spare, or maybe the idea is there's 2 people that are meant to be using the van at any given time. Sometimes, anyway. And I lost one of them while I was delivering mail. What I fear may have happened is I may have accidentally fed it through the letterbox while I was holding it and while I was giving mail to customers. I don't know exactly if that's what happened, but it's the most logical explanation based on the facts. I revisited the scene where I knew I'd lost the keys, and I knocked on every single house, and I didn't find it. I don't know if the keys have ever been found because I no longer work there. But anyway, I crashed into a neighbor's fence. I lost a set of keys. Oh yeah, and another thing that happened, which I don't know if it was my fault, but it probably might have been, is that something happened with the car door of one of the vans I was driving. Basically, the van door on the driver's side became firmly wedged in the car's panel, so I couldn't open it. I mean, I could open it, but I need to really use all my strength, and honestly, that made the van all but unusable. And luckily, they got a mechanic to fix this in. But can you imagine 3 mistakes like that, and it's not even your first unsupervised week? And on top of that, it was unbelievably hot. I hadn't made any good progress. I just wanted to go home and fall asleep and never wake up to do this again. If this was, one thing I should make clear, if this was only 3 or 4 days a week, I probably might have stuck in there for the long haul. I might have stuck with it a bit longer. Maybe, possibly, at a push, I might have even endured 5, but this was 6 days a week. 6 out of 7. The way this contract works, it's a very unique contract. I don't know if there are any other branches that do anything like it. It's a contract where you work 6 days a week. Officially, on paper, the contract is 30 hours a week, because the idea is you're working 5-hour shifts on a single day. You're meant to be working 5 shifts in a week, but they have you work 6, and in return for this, on every 6th week where you work for them, you get to have the whole week off. They call it the Wallington contract. I don't know if there's any other branch that does anything like it, but that's pretty much the way they do things over there. Some people by nature are incredibly hardy, and they can do this without breaking a sweat. All I can say is, I learned that steamy afternoon, I wasn't one of those people. It was unrealistic for me to pretend that I could keep going at this job. It was nothing like the job that I used to have. It was way too much trouble, way more trouble than it was worth. And suddenly, the prospect of me making enough money to pay off my credit debt and to save up, it just didn't seem to matter anymore. It still does. I'll get to that maybe later in a different video, but I calmly explained to my boss that this was it. I just couldn't handle this job anymore. And I explained to my mum, and she was furious with me. She felt like I'd let the whole company down, but I was so unbelievably exhausted. I just went home, had a cold shower, and I fell asleep. I can't remember for how long. And that was last Wednesday. It has been, I'm trying to think. Yeah, it's been 5 days since then. So I'm no longer employed with Royal Mail. It did occur to me there and then that maybe I could have spoken to Sandra, my manager. I could have asked her, are there any other jobs you have available? Like, for instance, are there any mail routes you have where they have 2 people working at the mail route at the same time? Or maybe do you have any collection roles? I found out since then that no, there aren't any. There aren't any for the branch where I was working, and for that matter, there aren't any on the island either. Also, my old manager, She hasn't been answering any of my calls or any of my text messages. I fear what may have happened is she's lost her patience with me. She doesn't want to speak to me again. I hate the fact that I've become used to this. You might say that I brought this entirely on myself. Maybe you're right, but the way I see it, it's not logical for me to go back to try and get back and do this job again. I gave it a try. I couldn't handle it. The entire time I remember working at this job, I felt morbid and suicidal. I felt, I just can't take this. I'm not getting better at this job. I can't take on instructions. I don't even know what it is I'm doing wrong. I don't know what more they could do to hold my hand to make sure that I get the hang of this job easier. I never intended for this to be the end of my relationship with Royal Mail, but there we go. So currently, I'm unemployed. What are my plans, realistically? What do I plan to do from here on out? My honest answer is, I have no clue. I didn't think this would happen. I had no reason to think that I would struggle and fail so hard with this job before I tried it. It was only logical, I guess, to think, you know, I've worked Royal Mail for a year and a bit. There's no reason why I can't do this. It takes me back to that conversation I had with that manager who, when I wanted to try working in deliveries, and he warned me that he wasn't sure about me, and then he dropped the A-bomb and asked me that question. I hate being in a position where I have to look back and think, yes, he was right. I should have seen the warning signs. I really don't want to go back to working as a barista or a bartender. I don't know realistically where I'm going to go from here. If anything comes, I guess I'll notify you, but anyway, that's the situation that I'm in for now. Anyway, I'll keep you guys updated if anything else happens. But I figure now that I have a lot more time on my hands, you're probably going to be seeing a lot more of these vlogs. That's one thing I will credit. One thing I will credit myself for in giving this job opportunity away is that now I have more free time. And I've said this before, you got to have some free time. I had none whatsoever with that job. So who knows? Maybe it was the right choice, maybe it wasn't. I guess we'll find out in due course. Anyway, you guys take care. This has been Tracking. See you guys later.